So I've been building games for a few years now, and I have a whole back catalog of projects that I've worked on in the few years that I've been doing Unity development. So I figured, hey, let's go back and revisit some of those projects, and you can see the installations of from where I started as a complete beginner to where I'm at now as a full-time game developer. I think those projects are around here somewhere. Hey, do you want to help me find my game projects? Great, let's go! So the majority of my projects that I have laying around here can be categorized as day prototypes. And this is because I only spent about a day throwing something together to either learn something new or to test a mechanic for a new game idea that I had. And if I could go back and give my past self some advice, I would say that I should do less of these. Following through with projects was vital to my personal growth as a game developer, and a lot of these little prototypes weren't super useful for me in the long run.
Ah, there it is.
So here's a game where you're meant to drag your finger around on your phone and the player icon will follow it around. The main mechanic here that I thought was cool is that you can't decide when to fire missiles at enemies. Your shots are on a timer, so you need to try and point it directly at an enemy at the same time the shoot timer runs out. It's actually pretty fun to play. This one also had an interesting mechanic, where the player has a light that acts as a shield around you, which slowly diminishes over time. Enemies can't touch you while you're surrounded by light, so the goal is to run around and find more boosters to replenish your light shield as the mob of enemies slowly grows bigger around you. Ah, here's one. This one I think might actually have potential if I ever decide to pick it up again. The idea is that you can rotate these shooters before each new round starts. Then, when the round starts, you can just tap on the screen and they will shoot in whatever direction they're facing. The goal is to hit all the falling targets before they can get to the bottom. I think there's some good opportunity here for level design and clever ricocheting mechanics. Yeah, this one wasn't super clever. I just wanted to see if I could copy the main mechanic in Overcooked, where the players can run around, pick up items, and place them on different counters.
Aha!
So this project was just getting my feet wet with VR. I had access to an Oculus Quest, so I wanted to see how I could use hand presence to pick up objects in a game and what the possibilities were with player size and kind of looking down at the level in a sort of giant mode. Maybe in here? Have you guys seen my games? No? This is the last of my day projects, and this was kind of just a sandbox where I could mess around with animations, movement AI, some post-processing effects, and stress testing a lot of objects colliding simultaneously. Basically, I was just trying to test new tools within Unity that I hadn't used before. The result looked pretty good in my opinion, but it wasn't really a game, just kind of messing around. Okay, so these next type of projects are a bit bigger than the last bunch. They were some of the most fun that I've had doing game development, and that's because I worked on them with a group of friends. We never finished any of them, but it was a fun way to learn together and to collaborate. This first group project here was challenging because it was one of my very first games. As a team, we learned core game mechanics, how to set up a game loop, and how to deploy to mobile devices. Also how to develop basic art assets, and a lot more. It was basically just an endless runner where you can pick up power-ups and avoid obstacles.
Aha!
So this project here was done in a 24-hour hackathon, and it was the first time I ever touched the Unity game engine. The learning curve was steep, but we actually managed to implement the core gameplay loop. We just used a free asset we found, so it ended up as a game where two T-posing police officers would launch donuts at each other to try and knock each other off of their platforms. A lot of laughs and fun memories with this one. Have you seen my game? Up next is a project we called Abyss. Our goal was to make something similar to a Slender Man game, but instead of being in the woods, you're underwater swimming around as a diver who is being hunted by a shark. And instead of collecting notes, you're collecting treasure chests. But each time you collect a treasure chest, you start losing more blood, which attracts the shark to you. This was an awesome project because we were able to work with more 3D models, lighting and mood, sound effects, and I did a bunch of work on building a dynamic terrain generation system using Perlin noise. And again, this one never saw the light of day, but the time was well spent spent in my eyes. Alright, so this group of games are the ones I'm most proud of, because these games I decided to go the extra mile and give them just enough polish and put in the effort to release them to the public. I figured out how to work with Android and iOS app stores, how to display ads in my games, set up in-app purchases, do some marketing campaigns, and I even worked with a couple mobile publishers. So this game is nothing special, but it was my first game I completed and published, so it's near and dear to my heart. My goal here was to create the absolute simplest game I could think of, so I would have no excuses about finishing it and getting it on the App Store. All you do is tap on the screen, and the ball will jump with each tap. The goal is to avoid obstacles and climb to a certain height to beat each level. I'm really glad I made the game so simple, because going through the publishing process was a whole ordeal on its own.
Let's see here. Nope. Nope. Aha!
Good old Tilecross. This was one of my biggest leaps into legitimate game development. I had an idea for a puzzle game, and I wanted to make something appealing with a little extra polish. The idea behind this game is that you're a cube that has to traverse across a level full of tiles and get to the beam of light at the end. The catch is that all the tiles fall after you go across them, and you need to eliminate all of the tiles before you can finish the level. I had no 3D modeling or animation experience, so I stuck with basic shapes. I also didn't want players to run out of levels, so I made them generate procedurally, so each playthrough is different. The levels get longer as you go on, and you only get 3 lives before you have to start back at level 1. I made a logo, some background music, a menu with settings, included advertisements and in-app purchases, and I even made a gameplay trailer for it. It wasn't a top-notch production, but I was proud that I was able to do all of these things by myself and ship a full product to the App Store. After my previous mobile games, I decided to do a little bit of market research to see what kind of games were currently appealing to people. I looked at the top trending games on both Android and iOS, and I came up with the idea for Pushpack. The idea behind Pushpack is that you're herding a group of balls along this path and trying to keep as many as you can from falling off the edge. You need to get a certain percentage of them to the goal in order to move on to the next level. And like my last game, this game also has procedural level generation that gets harder with each additional level. Now, this game didn't do as well as Tilecross did, and I think a big part of that is that people couldn't figure out how to control pushing the balls very easily. I probably should have tweaked that and made it a bit more intuitive. But for both this game and for Tilecross, I was able to work with publishers to run marketing campaigns to audiences on social media. Overall, it was a great experience, and I learned so much from releasing these games. Ah yes, my game about tree people. I'm not going to dive into this game because I actually made an entire video about how I made it in 12 hours for a game jam, so go check it out. Well, unfortunately, those are the only games that I've released. The good news, though, is that I learned enough from these projects to get a full-time job as a game developer. Now, these last couple of projects I'm going to show are still in progress. I spent probably a few weeks on each of them, and I may pick them up eventually, but here's what I've got so far. So this is kind of a 2D Robin Hood game. You can click and drag to jump in a particular direction, and when you're in midair, you can click and drag again to aim your bow and arrow. My idea right now is for each level to have 3 bags of money hanging around, and you have to sever the ropes holding them up in as few jumps and shots as possible. I'm pretty excited about this game because it's already fun to play, and I actually made all of the art for this game myself, which is a new skill that I had been working on. Now, if you can't tell, this game draws a lot of inspiration from that old Tanks minigame that you could play on the Wii. I was thinking about how fun that game was and how a few extra mechanics could really make it into something special. At the basic level, you can move around and aim, and when you fire a missile, it will ricochet off of walls. This is the project I'm currently pursuing to release eventually, so you can wishlist it now on Steam. I'm currently in the process of making some enormous design changes, so the gameplay will be a lot more strategic and engaging, but I'll explain all of that in a future video. So this game is also in the early prototyping phase, but I think it has a lot of potential, and I've had a ton of fun prototyping it. The idea is that you're able to manipulate the ground around you in a similar fashion as what you would see in Avatar: The Last Airbender. I've been messing around with different methods of manipulating meshes in Unity, and I think this game could be really fun if I put the time into it. Right now you can kind of just run around, pick up and throw chunks of earth, and also raise pieces of ground up underneath you. I'm a bit nervous to dive full on into developing this further because I could easily see it taking a few years to complete. Oh yeah, this project has been great for me so far because it allowed me to get introduced into the the world of multiplayer mechanics. I used the Photon framework to set up some online sandbox levels to figure out how to get live players into the game. Then I started building out the actual game design. The idea behind this was to build out a social deduction game, similar to a 3D version of Among Us, but with some fun twists. But as you can see, I didn't get very far with it. So that's the list of game projects that I've worked on that ultimately led to me working full-time at a game studio. And part of that process was creating an online portfolio to show some of these projects and the kind of skills that they've taught me. I hope this was helpful for some of you. I know I was very interested in seeing how people progressed into becoming game developers, so I'm just trying to make some videos that I would have wanted to see myself just a few years ago. Let me know what you guys thought of my projects, and let me know if there's a project that you think I should be focusing on developing next. Subscribe if you want to keep up to date with what I'm working on, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have you seen my games? Oh my